How to
This
get
one's
started with chickens from the ground up. All right, so this is a general disclaimer. I'll let you guys read that later. I know you guys all know what that is, so let's get started. This is the agenda. We're going to start with planning, then how to get your supplies, what to get, right? How to build it, health considerations, actually getting the chicken, and any questions. Okay, so planning when you've decided to do anything, right? The best thing to do is start with planning. So you've decided to get chickens. Hopefully more goes into the initial startup for having chickens than it does actually maintaining the chicken. So this is where a lot of the overwhelm can occur for people when they are actually thinking about getting chickens. It ends there because they start looking into it, and there's so many different types of chickens, so many different types of coops and runs, and do you want to do them free range or actually close them in? How many do you want? All those kinds of things, right? But if you actually have it planned out, then once you've got the chickens and you've got them going, you're good from there. So all right, so, backwards. So we're going to start asking yourself some questions. What kind of chickens do you want? Why are you getting them? So for what purpose? Do you want them for eggs? Do you want fresh eggs in the morning? Do you want meat chickens where you're actually using them for meat? Do you want dual purpose? You want them as pets? Maybe you have some kids. Do you want ornamental? Use them for shows. People that actually show their chickens. Do you want them as pest control on a farm that you have? If you want them for eggs, I know this is a chicken webinar, but have you ever considered ducks? I don't want you to, just go straight to chickens, because that's what chickens do, is lay eggs and get all the way through and then realize that maybe you actually wanted ducks, because ducks actually tend to live twice as long. They tend to lay their eggs for twice as long. Chickens actually have a very short laying time. They'll typically lay about for 3 or 4 years. Whereas ducks will lay about 6 to 7 years. So, and ducks' eggs tend to be larger than chickens and a bit richer. Now, sometimes that can be a difference. Sometimes if you've never had a duck egg before, you find you don't like the way that the duck eggs taste. So if that's the case, I completely say go back to the chickens. I would definitely taste a duck egg before you get it for that purpose, and then find out that you don't like it. But as far as personality goes, they all have their own unique personality. Personally, if I were choosing between the two, I actually think ducks have a little bit more personality, but I've worked with ducks before that are actually tend to be a lot more like Gumdrop in their personality. They are just a crack up. So I go more that way. But that being said, I do like chickens too. There's all sorts of different types. So what kind of chicken? There's over 500 different breeds of chicken and hybrids. And so we'll get into some of those later. Where do you live? What type of area? Is it rural or urban? Rural or urban? I'm kind of mixing those two together and speaking. How close are your neighbors? If they're close, will they care if you have a rooster crowing in the morning? Or chickens that cluck loudly? People don't often realize how loud some chickens can be. There are some that are quieter than others, so that goes into picking as well. But they can get quite loud, certain species, and people don't think about that. They only think of the rooster crowing. And you do also need to realize that it can be beneficial to have a rooster in your flock Don't just think, oh, I just want chickens because I want the eggs and that's all I want. I don't care if they're breeding or any of that. A rooster can actually do more than just breed with your birds. He can kind of be the game warden of the flock. He can keep them in charge, keep them in line in the area they need to be, all sorts of things. So you usually want one rooster with your flock. So they are a good thing to have. If you do have close neighbors, you can always share some fresh eggs with them and smooth things over that way. So that's another way to go. Do you have an HOA in your area? If so, are there restrictions on what you can build, how big it is, what it looks like, what kind of animals you can have, or how many animals you can have, right? All of those are things that you need to think of before you get started. Last thing you want is to go building or buying some big expensive chicken coop and then find out that your HOA doesn't allow it. I have a friend who is a licensed falconer that I actually trained in falconry. She bought a shed. So it looks like a shed, it doesn't have any bad looks to it whatsoever. It's not like she just put plywood up together. And she had major problems with her HOA because it wasn't just a shed. She put her red-tailed hawk in it. Now, granted, they had to actually know that she had her red-tailed hawk in there. They had to come by it. Well, it was actually her neighbor complaining, but it's not like she let the hawk out roaming the area. She was legally allowed to have that bird on her license, and it didn't look like anything that was an eyesore. It was just somebody complaining that she had it. But these are all things that go into having any animal, but building an enclosure that's outside for an animal, you need to think about that when you're in an area that has an HOA. Do you have kids? While they can build a great sense of responsibility for a kid, these are great first pets for them. There are certain breeds of chicken that aren't quite as friendly as others. And so you probably don't want to get those if you have chicken, if you have kids. You don't want to get those types of chickens if you have kids. So think about that when you're doing this. Do you have a space in mind already for the coop or run? And if so, how big is it? What is the ground like in your area? I personally live on a granite hill. And so we can't actually dig into our ground very easily. And that's important. That can limit the type of substrate that you're putting on the ground for them. It can limit the type of enclosure that you're building too, right? If you're trying to actually build it into the ground because of, you having tornadoes in the area or, really bad winds or whatever, that can be limiting. So these are things that you need to factor into your planning stage, right? Before you get into building. What time do you typically have that will be devoted to cleaning their enclosure? Again, this is going to be whether it's weekly, monthly, any of that, daily, all depends on how you're building the enclosure, the substrate, how you want to have it made. All of that can go into this, but think about it in reverse, right? What time are you going to be able to spend? That can be why you're building it a certain way. So are you going to have help cleaning it? Is this going to be your kid's job if you have kids? Is there somebody else that's going to do it for you? So all of those are things to think about too. What are the local predators in your area that you have to worry about that might go after your chickens? Do your neighbors have dogs or cats that you have to worry about? Now, most people think about predators, they're thinking about the things that are outside, wild, like the hawks, the falcons, the owls at night, things like that, even coyotes, right? Raccoons, things like that. They're not thinking, oh, well, I have a neighbor that's cat always, it's free, right? It's a wild cat or a feral cat that just roams in the area. Or my next door neighbor has dogs, but they get out all the time. They're not good about locking them up. All of those are considered predators that you need to worry about, right? Because if they get out all the time, or they're loose cats that roam the area, they can then end up in with your birds, or if your birds are free range, they can end up getting your birds that way. So these are all things to think about. This one's a little bit more tricky. You might not necessarily know this very easily if there's anybody who is a falconer in your area. But again, this goes along the lines of if they lose their bird, right, then you have to worry about that. Now, this is probably not going to be very different from you worrying about wild ones in the area. The difference comes into play where the breed of bird, right? If you don't have a lot of wild hawks or falcons that you need to worry about in your particular area, then you have a neighbor down the road that does, then you're going to worry about that. So just things to again try and find out. That one's a little bit harder to find out sometimes. And then where is the nearest vet that's willing to treat birds? And I said specifically chickens here because chickens are more typical farm bird, right? A lot of people are more likely to have chickens than they are, say, a parrot, and definitely more likely to have chickens than a bird of prey. And so you might be more easily find a vet that's willing to treat chickens than you are an avian certified vet that's willing to treat parrots or birds of prey or things like that. And so, it's also up to you whether you actually want the avian certification, or you're fine with a vet that just has years of experience treating these birds. I personally have had both, and the one that I have had for the past probably decade and a half or so at this point, is not avian certified, but I trust him with all of my birds' lives. I mean, he is an incredible vet, and he has not had the extra years of training in school to become avian certified, but he has had a lot of years training in the field, right, with people bringing in their birds, their wildlife, their whatever. And so it's different. Are they close by? Will you need to drive an hour or more to get to them? These are things to think about too, because while we can do a lot for you here in the network that I've created, there's a lot of us that know different things, and I will certainly help wherever I can. I am not a veterinarian, so there's going to be some things that I can't do, and I'm certainly not able to do a lot through the computer. So unless you're close by me, which I don't think any of you are at this point, there's a lot that can't be done with the oils in case of emergency, although we can buy you the time you need to get there. With some things, there are some things that you still absolutely need to go to a vet for. And so it's always good to know where exactly that vet is, and how long of a drive it'll be to get to them in an emergency before you actually go taking this step, just to keep in mind, especially if you have kids that may be upset if you aren't able to make it to the vet in time, and you end up losing the bird. That's just something to prepare them for beforehand if you actually do take this step. So substrate, roof, droppings board, these the material that these three are made from are often dependent upon how much time you have to devote to cleaning on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and the area that you're in, right? We talked about the fact that I'm on a granite hill, and that limits the type of substrate that I can use. So again, these are different types of common substrate flooring that are out there. It's not limited to these, but these are the most common. So grass, concrete, hemp, wood chips, sand, leaves, pine shavings, straw, gravel, mesh. Again, I've used AstroTurf as more of a mat or pieces for mine. So those are different possibilities too. I've shown you here, there's a hinged plywood. I like the idea of putting that on the roof of the coop area, because if you do use something that is easy to hose off or clean, with water, as their droppings board, and I believe it's the next one that I will show you my options for that, then you want to have the ability to let it dry quickly. And my particular bird enclosures don't do that very well, because the only way that the sun gets in to help them dry is leaving the door open or in through the windows. Whereas if you have a hinged plywood roof, then you can open up part of the roof and allow the sun to come in to dry it quicker, and then close it back up afterwards. So it's just a thought for the coop area, at least the coop. So this is where they're coming in at night, where it's more closed in. So supplies. Once you've planned everything out, it's time to gather the supplies for the droppings board. As I was just talking about, I like plexiglass, or what I use for my enclosures for the walls is called Clear. That's the brand name, Kleer. It is a PVC type material, very easy to wash. It comes as sheets or as a thicker trim board material. This is very important to know. We talked about it when I did the cleaning webinar, because it is it's not as standalone as the plywood is when it comes to the roof, because it can be taken right off it. Because it's a PVC material, it's really, really lightweight. And so it's nice that it's easy to clean and that it reflects the sun too, because it's usually white. But that cannot be your roof by itself. You can have it on the top or on the bottom as, one addition to your roof, whatever to, if you want it easy to clean. Although, as I was just mentioning, if you can just do a hinged plywood, that would probably be better for these guys. I mean, they aren't flying all the way to the roof like my birds are. Chickens just don't do that. So unless you have, a bunch of perches leading up to there, you don't really need to worry as much about the roof getting a lot of poop and stuff on it for that to need to be cleaned from the inside. So I would just recommend, wood that can be hinged on the top for their coop area. But you can certainly use the Clear as their droppings board, which goes under the roosting bar, which if they are not actually in laying eggs or sitting on eggs, then they're going to be on the roosting bar. And because they poop most of their poop at night, that droppings board is going to get most of their droppings or poop. And so that is going to be a major area that you need to clean, which is why I like the idea of using that and having the roof ability to open up so you can clean that, hose it off easier. Now, I put a little reminder here to remember that you want to have it all planned out before you actually start to gather the supplies. Otherwise, you're going to be constantly going back to, Home Depot, Ace, all of that, because you forgot this or you forgot that, or, and it's good cost wise too to figure everything out so that you aren't spending more than you actually wanted to just on the supplies. Building. So to get some ideas from various coops and runs before you get your supplies and start building yours is a really good thing. Obviously, would have made more sense to put the building first, but you don't actually build it until later. So I'm just going to give you some ideas in this section, and hopefully people are going to watch the whole thing before they actually start doing any building of a chicken, coop or run anyway. So doesn't matter what order they're looking at this in, right? They're going to do them all in the right order when they actually look at it. So basic needs when creating or designing. You want to have, do you want to have and keep a garden? And that's something that you want to think about, because if your birds are out roaming around and you have a garden, your garden's not going to stay a nice, pretty garden, because those chickens are going to forage and walk all over it and poop all over it and peck it. And that's pretty much going to be destroyed. So those are all just things to think about when you're creating and designing. So you want to have a safe house or a coop for the night protection. Open or free range versus closed in run. This is something that is a big controversy out there, right? I personally prefer the closed in, as I know Dr. Rourke has mentioned too, although if you are using them for pest control, that can sometimes be a little bit more difficult on a farm, right? But you want to have the ability to protect these hens, especially from, hawks and falcons that are going to come and swoop and get them. And if you have them in an open field, because that's your farm and they've got to, control the pests in your big farm, then you're probably going to lose chickens on a daily basis, I would imagine, from the wild birds. So that's why I personally would rather say, if you're going to go this route, it's better to have a closed in run. They can get their exercise in there and they're safe. So that doesn't mean that they can't, do what you want them to do. You just have to be a little bit more creative about how you're making it. So nest boxes. You want to have for your laying hens, especially if you're using them for eggs. And it's generally one box for every 3 to 4 hens. Size consideration for how big you want everything to be. It's usually 3 to 3.5 feet or 1 square meter of floor space for every bird. And that's basically, it's space to stretch their wings out during the day. This is more the size of the run. The coop can be a little bit smaller, but if you are in a very cold area that gets, an area that gets cold during the winter, that you have to actually lock them into the coop for, a few months at a time, then you want to take that into consideration for your coop size too, because then we're talking about months of time where they would not be able to stretch their wings the same, and that's going to end up as a problem where they eventually start going after each other because they don't have enough room. So you need to take all that into consideration into, again, what's the weather where you are, right? Where are you located, and how does the weather change over the months of the year? They do need companionship, right? So the smallest flock that you should have should be 3 to 4 birds tops, or I should say bottom, right? Not tops, but that's the smallest that you're having. Good ventilation. I don't recommend insulating your coop. And there's actually a video that I will link you guys to at the end here, where they discuss actually the problem with insulation. So they do more of a deep kind of, I forget what that term is, deep cleaning, deep litter method. I don't know how I'm so lost on that wording, where they just basically they keep putting more hay in to balance out the amount of CO2. So if you have a area that is closed in that has insulation, then you are actually upping the possibility, increasing the possibility that you're going to have more parasites, that you're going to have more possibility for mold and things growing where their poop is, right? And then you're going to have possibility for more respiratory infection, because again, you need to think about the coop is the area where they are locked in at night, and at night is when they're going to do the most pooping. So if you are now insulating that area too, you're heating up the area, not having as good a ventilation, even if you're thinking that you're having ventilation. If you're adding insulation with the ventilation, then it can just create a big mess that you don't want. And as I said, he kind of briefly mentions it in that video, and so you'll get a little bit more of an explanation there. You want a dry dirt area for them to do their dust bathing in. And this, you actually want it to be big enough for all of the birds. So they tend to do more of their dust bathing together as a whole flock. So keep that in mind as well. And offer at least 2 clean sources of water. And remember to check it often, especially around dusk, because that's when they're going to do the most drinking, is the last few hours of daylight. And they are not smart enough to not poop in their water. None of the birds are. So you have to remember to check and change that out. You need to have a bar or a thick perch for them to roost on when they aren't laying. So these are all just kind of things to check off when you're creating and designing. Oh, wrong way. Okay. Food source, you want it to be appropriate for that species. Remember, these are omnivores and they need protein too. So bugs, right? Not too many treats though. We did have the nutrition talk from Dr. Rourke, so I'm not going to get too far into nutrition. We have that in the group, so I'll let you guys refer to that. You need to have a light to maintain egg production for 12 to 6 hours per day. Require at least 6 to 8 hours of darkness. A way to actually close them in at night and let them out in the morning. Now, this is also one of the controversies in a lot of the backyard chicken groups. Some people seem to think, oh, they can handle themselves in the wild, you don't need to worry about them if they're left out at night. This is another thing where it depends on where you are. If you are in an area where it freezes, it gets really cold, those birds can get frostbite. I know Ashley in this group has posted about a bird that had frostbite and actually lost a couple digits because of it. So again, these birds are not smart. You need to actually lock them in to their coop at night and then let them back out in the morning. If this is not something that you can conceivably do on a regular basis, they do have automatic doors that are either timer set, or various different types out there. So, if this is better for you, a better option, then you might consider using that when you're building your coop. Or maybe this isn't the best option. So it just things that you need to think about if you are in an area that gets really cold at night, especially during the winter time, right? You want to spend some time with your flock. This is how you are going to catch an illness before it's too late to fix. Remember that birds don't show illness until it's almost too late to reverse, and they are still a type of bird, so that does apply to them. And the more that you know what normal is for them, the more likely you are to catch it sooner. So it's also crucial that if you're spending time with them, you're picking them up from the time that you get them, you're doing a lot of handling, or just, even handling once a day, but, on a daily basis from day one, then you're less likely to have a bird that's going to get stressed when the vet does those same things, handling the bird, on just to check it out, things like that. Remember, we do have a first aid webinar in this group that will go over just basic exams so that you know how to do that at home. And again, that's less likely for them to get a stress when the vet does it if they've already had it, routinely from you. And routinely, can be once every couple months. It doesn't need to be all the time, but picking up the bird daily would be ideal, just so that they're used to being handled. I highly recommend getting in touch with your local poultry club and or the Nutrina dealer before you get your flock. Getting involved with those kinds of places, you can learn so much and know things that I can't tell you, right? I can't tell you where each individual place is that has the best breeders, that has a place that doesn't have diseased chickens that you're going to get, or that does, so that you avoid them. There's just things that you can't know everything about every area in every part of the world, right? I mean, we're on the internet here, so you can be from everywhere. I know we have someone here from Australia in our group, so it's so important to be involved in one of the groups in your area so that you can find out these things that you just can't find out online. You need to be involved with your group. So various types of coops and runs. So I've got some nice pictures for you guys to get ideas. Now down here in the corner on the right, I really like the idea of having plants on the top of, whether it be, obviously I had mentioned opening up having the ability to open up the coop. You can have part of it be that's over the roosting bar, part of it be able to be opened up. You can have part of it be a planter area here. You can have just over the nesting boxes be a planter area. You can have the planting be, above the run. But the nice thing about putting plants up there is that it helps keep the area warm. And they're not going to destroy the plants that are up there. So, you can figure out where works best for you. There's also ones that you'll see later on where they have it around the outside. So those are ones that the birds can't quite get to, but the birds are still benefiting from as well. So, and then there's different things in the center here that are like different ways for them to still be pest control, right? But they are covered from the outside hawks and things. So he's got a long netting area that goes more of kind of like a smaller run around different parts of his yard or farm. You can see here in the middle. So some of these I've gotten from Pinterest, some of these I've gotten, from other places. Pinterest is full of ideas. Some of them are not so great, and I will point out some things that I don't think are good. And some of them are great ideas. So you just got to know what you're looking for, what not to do, and then you can start looking at what will work for you. So here on the left, you can see they put an umbrella in the stump here. I'm not as big a fan of this normal umbrella here because the normal size umbrella, I feel like if you have one good gust of wind, that thing can turn inverted and you can end up with a chicken that gets caught in the spokes and snapped into it. So I'm not that big a fan of the smaller normal size umbrellas that that are used for this. That being said, there's one, and I don't know if I used that in a picture or not, that somebody used the actual, those bigger umbrellas that are meant like for putting into the ground in the beach or, at the park or whatever, those bigger ones that aren't gonna end up shutting anywhere near, they're much taller than what your bird is going to end up being. So as long as it's anchored in properly, it's much safer than using a regular umbrella here. So so these are some options here. And then these are, if you want to save money in some repurposing items, these are just some different thoughts for nest boxes, right, that people have used. I thought these were kind of interesting. They use tires or half tires as nesting areas. Now I can't tell whether they are both in enclosed areas or not. We still want them in an enclosed area because, again, we want them protected from the predators, but it just gives you some ideas of stuff they can you can use that you may already have. Yes, I love the nest box ideas too. They're very unique. And then the taking an old cabinet, I would have never thought of that. I don't know how they have the eggs actually dropping through to the drawers there, but it's a very cool idea because they are still laying the eggs and you have a very easy way of accessing them afterwards. Kind of looks like they're still using the very bottom as storage. I think I see a beer bottle down there and other stuff. So it looks like they're still using some of it as a regular, storage area for themselves. And then they have that for there. So I don't know if they have, the chickens exiting in or entering in from the back, or how they have that, or if they just put them in there. But yeah, it was a very unique kind of nesting area that I thought was very interesting. I wanted to share with you guys. So there are also ready-made ones that you can purchase. Now, some of them are super expensive. I would not certainly go that route. But by all means, if you have the money and you want to do it, it's very simple. And it's already done. Then you can just go get your birds, but you do want to, pay attention to if it works for your area and for the amount of birds that you have. So these two here are the same thing, obviously, just different angles, but they're built-in nest boxes that you would put, and the eggs roll down into there. Personally, they don't look comfy to me. I mean, obviously they don't have the nesting material in there yet, but in my opinion, if and other people have said that too, if they don't look cozy, then the bird's probably not going to use them. So those are things to think about too. And then this one down in the corner in the right, I want to say this one was like $3.5 grand, like over $3,000, I know. And to me, that was not worth that. From the looks of it anyway. You don't have any run attached to it. You're supposed to be able to fit 15 birds in that. That does not look like you can fit 15 birds in that to me. And it also doesn't look like it provides a very easy way of cleaning. You don't have anything really under their roosting bar except for the floor. And that's going to make a huge mess that the birds are then going to step in if they're not on the roosting bar or in the nest boxes. And you're going to have major issues on their feet. They're possibly going to be eating some of it. And that just seems like a big problem to me. The ones on the top have both, right? They have a little bit of closed in run area and the nest box. or the coop area, and then the run goes partially underneath it. So those are other options that are pre-made. Some of those just, they don't look quite as big as I feel they should for the amount of birds that they're saying. But again, it all depends on what they look like in reality too, right? Versus a picture. I personally would go the make it yourself route. And I feel like you would end up spending a lot less money and you'd be a lot happier in the long run. But if you want something quick and easy, by all means, and you have the money. So this is in the middle is the automatic door that I found that I actually think is worth investing if you are someone that cannot get to let them in and out. Especially, I know Ashley had talked about somebody who had she helps out that doesn't actually get to see their birds much the entire winter months, which to me sounds very sad. And I don't know why she has them if she doesn't get to see them very much that much in the winter. I don't know what she does. But that being said, everybody's different. And I would say something like this, because I think that's the same person who had those pictures where it looked like it was just the like the meat plastic in the doorway for the birds to basically be able to go in and out. And that was the only thing that could kind of shield the warmth to stay in that area. To me, that's not enough, especially if she lives in Michigan. I would invest in using an automatic door. Now, personally, I also do see the worrisome that I'm sure a lot of you also see, which is it going to malfunction and come down on my bird? But if it's this or letting all the birds freeze, then I would rather risk it with this. I think you're less likely to lose a bird that way. And the thing is that in reality, I don't think that the company would still be promoted so much and out there as popular as they seem to be if they were killing birds on a regular basis with the door coming down and malfunctioning or whatever. So I think it's a good thing to look for if that's you, if you're not able to go in and lock them in at night and let them out in the morning. You also have things that you can purchase, like these attachments for feed bins, where their head goes, you're attaching it just to a regular bucket of feed, like a painter's bucket where you put food in. It comes with a little tool to make the hole, and then you put this little thing in so that the chicken goes in and gets the feed. It lessens the amount of feed that actually ends up on the ground, where they're possibly going to end up eating soggy feed, or you end up with a broken feeder that, again, the stuff ends up scattered on the ground. You end up with moldy feed, all sorts of stuff that can cause health issues. This is a little bit different option to avoid that. It also gives them a little bit more of a challenge to eat it, which is in itself a way of enrichment. Now, you do want to make sure that you have enough of them around so that you don't have birds pecking each other just to get at food. So it's kind of like, the litters with the cats, where you want one more litter box than you have cats. With this, you probably want one more feed bin than you have birds, so that you're sure that they're not going to peck just because they're not able to get enough holes if they're all eating at the same time. But the advantage also is the fact that you can have more stored in there. Whereas you wouldn't have to necessarily replenish it as much. And then all the way on the right here, just another idea that you can add as far as enrichment for, the coop or the run or anything, a swing just for them to sit on, So there's various ideas. And here are some things that you want to avoid right here on the left. You can see there's no protection from the wildlife, and they are going to destroy that garden. It looks like they already are. Now, some might say that they have protection from above, and this is one way to go if you want a free range, is to have a lot of tree coverage. But you also want to realize that those wild birds that are then going to, eat the chickens, the wild birds of prey, they are going to want to sit in trees at some point too. And even if they may not see the chickens from above, if they land in one of those trees, they may end up seeing it once they've landed in it. And so that is just something to consider. And you can see here in the middle, this is why you want the protection. That is a Cooper's hawk sitting on top of their little area there. Personally, that run that the chickens are running away from it in, or just walking, I don't know, sometimes they just don't notice, they just happen to be going in a different direction of the bird. Those wires do not look close enough together for that bird to not actually get them. To me, I think that bird could very easily still put its feet through those bars and get it. It's probably going to get caught doing it. But if the feet are powerful enough, your bird is possibly still going to get injured to the point of dying. It all depends on the bird, on the size of the chicken, on, a lot of things. But I personally would have a much tighter weave and a much higher space between the tallest chicken, and what the tallest point of this run is. And then all the way on the right here, it's a nice idea to use an old tire as, something for them to play on in their run. But I myself have gotten my ankle caught in the spokes of a bike before. So I guarantee that one, if not more, of those chickens are going to end up injured with something like that. So that is also things that you need to think about. Here are a few more. On the left, you can see they are storing their hay all the way at the top. If you want to store feed in your chicken coop, you need to make sure that there are not enough things and bars and stuff for the chickens to hop on to get up to where that feed is. Otherwise, that whole thing is going to be bad feed by the time you're ready to use it, or bad, laying substrate if that's what you're using it for, because they will have already pooped all over the top and possibly already pecked at it. So the swing looks fun. What about hanging knotted ropes or hanging knotted ladders for them to climb on, like you might find in a gymnasium school? Yeah. So those are options too. Yep. And then this middle, you can see I really like keeping the natural trees and stuff, but they don't have the top covered. So you're going to end up with a lot of birds in there. And depending upon how tall this is, I can't really tell. you may end up with a coyote that can jump into it. I can't tell the height of that from this picture. But we've had coyotes jump on our back post that is between 5 and 6 feet high. So it's certainly a possibility if there's no actual roof. And then all the way on the right here, that is just way too cluttered. Hay and plant material, and they've got stuff covering the netting, which is basically insulating all of that material. So again, you are providing an area for mites and parasites and respiratory issues galore, because they are adding their poop to all of that, and it is basically, it's getting not ventilated. So that right there is just an accident waiting to happen. Also with, if you end up with, I don't know where fire would happen, but to me, that just looks like one burst and you're gone too. It just, the whole thing looks like a problem to me. And then here are some good ideas for you. So we're done with the negative now. So we have some ladders for them to go up, and some natural branches. And this looks like a natural dirt or sand or mixture of both as the base. Here we have, in the middle, we've got like kind of stone blocks with some grass coming in between as their substrate, but they're using almost looks like the steering wheel of a boat on its side is kind of what it looks like to me, with the corn and I think maybe zucchini or something hanging down, some sort of treats as a way of enrichment for them, and hanging down, so they have to work for it a little bit. So that is a very good plan for that. And then on the right, obviously, you can save money if you can put some natural things in there, right? If you build your enclosure around like a tree that already exists, you do want to, again, make sure that you pay attention to it growing out, and you having a ceiling, right? So you don't want it open like that one before. You want no birds and wildlife to be able to get in through the top. So you're going to need to make sure that you keep up with a tree that's actually growing in there, so that it doesn't try and push through whatever ceiling you have. But I do love the idea of having natural stuff growing in your enclosure, and they will love it too. As you can see, they are actually already going after whatever it is at the bottom there. So now here, this is actually my favorite as far as ideas for natural stuff growing. So you can see on the left, you have some outer plants around the outside. Now, this is what I was talking about, where if you don't really want the garden completely destroyed, right, you can put some on the outside, but they can still benefit. So if you have some of the herbs that you want around them for them to get the aromatic benefit of, but you don't want them to actually eat all of it to the point where it's no longer living, right? Then you want it to keep growing, then don't put it inside, put it right around the outside. So I think probably a good option for that or possibility for that would be like peppermint. Because peppermint, it can take a little while for it to actually develop, and even once it's developed, it can be pretty easy for them to go through the whole thing. So if you have it right along the edge, then you can still keep it growing, and they can probably still get to it if they actually need some of it, digestive help or whatever. But they're not going to get at it to the point where it's not growing anymore, where they're destroying the whole plant. So that would be a good example of that, a good option. And then the other thing that I really like is to have ivy. And he actually talks about this in the video that I mentioned earlier too, that I'll link you at the end, is having, some sort of ivy or vines grow and end up providing a shaded area as even just part of the roof, which you can see they do on here on the right. So it provides natural shade during the summer and some warm area during the winter if they're actually in that area, if you're using it on the run, right? If they're in that area on the winter. Also provides some protection from predators. If you're talking about, hawks and falcons from above, they're not going to see it as likely to see it if they've got all of that above that area. So they're not going to land on it like the Cooper's hawk did in that other picture. So these are some health considerations you want to consider. Again, nutritional deficiencies that Dr. Rourke mentioned here, that some people may not know are caused by nutrition. So I'm just going to mention them, right? Rickets, curled in toes, leg weakness, egg issues. This can include being egg bound. Lethargy, digestive issues, poor or sparse feathers, crusty or watery eyes, nervous system disorders, decreased immunity to parasites or diseases. Now, some that are more common in poultry than in other birds are things like Merrick's disease, vent-gleet, which is a fungal infection that is usually from having like moldy feed, being egg bound. Now, this is again something that can happen to other birds, but you're seeing it more commonly in poultry because you're usually using them for eggs, and so they're constantly laying eggs, right? Scaly legs, fowl or avian pox, salmonellosis, infectious bronchitis, or IB, or sometimes it's IBV because they add the virus to the end of the name. Brooder pneumonia, coccidiosis, mycoplasma. Mycoplasma is often already in the chickens when you get them. So again, this can be something where it is a good thing to be in contact with your local club before you get your chickens so that you know which areas are more likely to have that and you don't get them from there. Saplingitis is common in older birds, and often it's not found until they're already dead. They can be dead for no apparent reason. So this is actually an infection of the ovarian duct. So this is infection. This is something that Sarah actually went through. So I know you guys have experienced this. So Pasteurella is another one that's common. So here are some other ones, maybe a little bit more overlap with other species, not quite as restricted, more to poultry. Although ear issues tends to, again, be more with poultry because their ears are more exposed than other birds are. Other birds tend to have more feathers over their ears than a lot of the chickens do. Newcastle's tends to be more in chickens, but it very easily can spread to other birds. Same with avian flu and West Nile. Air sac disease, parasites, more frequently mites with poultry. Sour crop, again, something we see in all of the birds. Bumblefoot, a very broad foot issue topic, right? Aspergillosis, again, that's common, caused by what the the substrate is, if you're not cleaning it enough, if they're breathing in stuff that's like moldy feces, that is often going to cause ASPR, which is a respiratory issue with them, right? Arthritis, gout, lead toxicity. Lead toxicity is a little bit also more common with them because you're often using wire for the cages, right? Chicken wire. And you want to make sure that you're using stuff that is okay for them, but or that's going to keep them in, but they're not necessarily going to be quite as mouthy on the bars with parrots and things like that. They also can get lead toxicity, but they mouth the bars. So, you want to make sure with them you're getting the cage that doesn't have that kind of a, material that it's built out of. It's a little bit harder to do that when you're building an outside enclosure. You're limited to the type of material. So that's where it's more common in poultry to see that kind of thing. So health considerations to your prevention is really key. So, you want to go, and I'll link these, you guys will get a copy of these slides, and I'll link the few sites that I've mentioned as well. So this is something I've mentioned before. If you go to the aav.org, you can actually click find a vet, and it'll help you find the closest avian vet in your area. You want to spend time with your birds so that you know what normal is for them from day one. Again, start feeling their keel from day one. And I have that keel scoring article, and that's in the group too. So make sure that they are safe from predators and from each other, right? These guys tend to be some bullies sometimes. So check routinely for injuries, for sharp spots, holes in the enclosure. Doesn't end after you build it, right? You have to maintain the area. You want to find and stay in touch with your local clubs near you, the poultry clubs. They will teach you, typically know when and if there is a rise in certain diseases and viruses in your area, like the Newcastles, West Nile, avian flu, those that, come around every year or two, very, very common in the poultry world. Remember, you can always check back in this network, for protocols on anything that comes up. And if you don't find it, hop on the weekly Q&A, drop me a chat, and use your oils. They are such a big, big tool to have the ability to have something that has, antiviral properties, as well as all of these other things, antifungal, antibacterial, all of that is such a useful thing when it comes to birds in particular, but to, for any animal, to not have to try and see if you can use this med or that med and hope that it works, and with viruses, there's usually not a medication. You're kind of writing it out. So these tools are so helpful, and to have them is just, it's really a good thing that we have these. So 7 best places to buy chickens: a hatchery, breeders that sell chicks, swap meets, farm supply stores, your neighbors, finding on social media, classified chickens for sale. Again, you want to check with your poultry club before you get them, so you don't end up having to cull your whole flock or spend tons of money because you have a flock that's sick and now you're trying to save them all. Especially if you have kids, the worst thing you want to have happen is to get all these cute little birds, for your house, for your backyard, to have as your kids' first pets or whatever, and find out that they are all sick, and possibly don't end up right with a vet that you can get to very easily, and now you need to decide if it's better to just get rid of them, unfortunately, and start fresh, or try and save them all. And that's not an easy decision if you have kids, especially, but it's not an easy decision at all. I don't like saying to have to cull the whole flock, that you have to kill them all and start fresh. But there are certain diseases where it's you're going to play catch up. You're trying to save something that you don't know when it started, because they came that way, and it possibly isn't even savable, especially if you're getting ones that you're adding to some you already had. You don't want those to spread to the ones that are good. I mean, it just sometimes, unfortunately, it ends up being better to kill them and start fresh. And as I said, I really don't like saying that, because birds are still living things, and I don't want to have you do that, or anybody do that. But it can be a very, very tough decision. So pay attention to your club before you get the chickens. Find out what is the healthiest place to get them. Very, very important. So I'm going to go over just a few quick breeds out there, very common. So here's some Brahma chickens. They are great for egg and meat birds. They are large, they're mellow and hardy birds. They can stand up well to hot and cold. Dominique chickens kind of look like this. They're egg and meat birds. They lay medium-sized brown eggs, and they're kind of middle to large. The males are about 7 pounds. Females can be up to 5 pounds standard. There's Orpington chickens. They're also egg and meat birds. They are cold hardy. So if you're a really hot area, you probably don't want this bird. They mature quickly. They're 10 to 8 pounds, 10 pounds male, 8 pounds female. They are docile. They're somewhat affectionate with humans. Leghorn. They are egg birds primarily, large white eggs. They're great layers. They're good foragers. They are resistant to both hot and cold. So these tend to be more if you have the very easygoing temperature year round, just right. Little harder to take care of if you've got extremes, and they're not quite as friendly. So if you have kids, I would not recommend that. The Sussex are egg and meat birds. They are large, but they can be quiet. So that's a good thing if you have neighbors. They're friendly, they're gentle, they like humans just as well as having their chicken buddies. They are a good layer of pinky brown eggs. They are fine with large open space or a small run. There's Rhode Island whites and Rhode Island reds. Rhode Island whites are egg and meat birds. They are cold hardy. They mature quickly. They're about 8.5 to 6.5 pounds. They are friendly and adaptable to a big area or a closed-in area. These are some of my favorites. So these first two here, the Polish, are absolutely adorable. They are more ornamental or egg birds. They may spook easily just because their feathers will be in their eyes, and all of a sudden they will see somebody standing there, and so they'll spook because of that. So if their crest is in their face when they first see you, they may get startled a little. But they are a smaller breed, 6 pounds to 4.5 pounds. They're excellent layers, and they're very comical, great for kids. Silkies are ornamental birds. They are best broody birds. Now, what that basically means for people that are new are They're not necessarily great at laying the eggs, but they are great for sitting on the eggs. So, you know, if you want a bird that'll help the rest of the flock, then this is good. They're known as the teddy bear of poultry, because they are very fluffy. As you can see, they have no barbs on their feathers. One of the only ones who has no barbs, which means that they do not handle cold very well, because they can't shake the wet off. They can't shake the snow off. So these are not ones for cold weather, but they are gentle, friendly, and great for kids. So if you are in an area that, you know, doesn't get too cold, but you have kids, then they are a great one. Or, you know, I mean, if you're in an area where you can take them in when it's super cold, then by all means, you can try it that way too. But these two are my absolute favorites, the Polish and the Silkies. And then the Wyandotte is, know if I'm even saying that right, is another one. And you can see the feathering is just incredible. So they are actually egg, meat, and meat birds. They're extremely cold hardy. They are a workhorse at about 8.5 to 6.5 pounds. They are actually known more for their coloring. They get prettier feathers as they get older. They are reliable egg layers. They're great foragers, but they can be too noisy if you have neighbors. So that is a good thing to know about them. So these are some of the resources I have used. So these are more kind of overall chickens. The one at the top tends to do everything for permaculture. So how to do all of that kind of stuff, sustain itself. Raising happy chickens, she kind of covers all topics, but that being said, not too big, obviously, or at least well-versed in the natural oil world, because there's a lot in the way of disease articles that she doesn't seem to think are fixable or treatable, whereas if you were using oils, you actually can treat them. So just keep that in mind. And then Backyard Chickens, they've got a ton of great resources on their website. They also have a Facebook group, and a lot of opinionated people in their Facebook group. And then the articles again online also, it's not always, you're not always going to find a group of chicken people that actually have experience with essential oils yet. Hopefully that will be changing, but we'll see. So that's where you come to me, right? That's where you come to our group for, or Dr. Rourke's. So then this is the video I was talking about, the how to build a chicken coop or run. It's a YouTube video. It's actually from the Growing Club, and it's a pretty good video, so I think it's worth watching. And then this is where I got my pictures there and info on the various breeds of chickens. So they do all poultry in this book. And she has a couple others as well. So you can actually get it on Amazon as a Kindle if you want. But they've got, you know, as I said, there's more than 500 breeds and hybrids out there. So if you want to know various different breeds and more info on them, I highly recommend different books from her, Carol Eckerus. She puts a lot of good information out there on as many breeds as I've been able to find anyway. So the most common ones. All right. You guys have any questions? It's just you, Joanna. You have any questions? None from you. Okay. All right. Well, that is it then. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to stop the recording and you guys can find again the resources, and I will put the slides from this in the group with this video as I've done for the previous. All right. I will see you guys later. Bye.